leave them alone. They didn't do anything to you.
Be realistic, although I will be.
Where are you? You bunch of losers! You're working with a professional here! Nice model!
You know, this movie's pretty good and all, but what it really needs is a children's cartoon. Yeah, that's a great idea. Beetlejuice is a 1988 comedy from the delightfully twisted mind of Tim Burton about a young married couple, the Maitlands, who die in the opening minutes of the film. Their restless spirits wake up in their home with no clue how to actually be ghosts, and have to seek help from the bureaucracy of the afterlife when arrogant, repulsive yuppies move into what used to be their house and prove to be too repugnant for the recently deceased to tolerate. When this gets them nowhere, mostly because 90% of the living can't actually see them, they turn to Beetlejuice, a freelance bio-exorcist specializing in removal of pesky living people. This proves to be a bit more than they bargained for, as Beetlejuice tends to be sadistic, crass, lecherous, and a little more homicidal than they intended, with less than savory plans for Lydia, the Dietz' gothy teenage daughter, who proved to be the only pleasant member of this obnoxious family. Things go all nutsy cuckoo in the end, but when the dust settles, Beetlejuice is banished back to the waiting room of the damned, and the living and the dead compromise and learn to make friends and share the home. This was in no way a film intended for small children. Rated R, full of swearing, scary imagery, and innuendo. But somehow, someway, somebody thought, this would make a great kids' cartoon! This was, of course, clearly a diseased mind, and the show was doomed to the forgotten pile of bad ideas for all time. Except that's not how it happened. The series was a huge hit. It ran for 3 seasons on ABC, with a 4th after it was picked up by the Fox network. Granted, the result was, a bit different, and other than character names and a few personality traits, the cartoon was nothing like the movie, but in the end, it was a cartoon that I and many other kids at the time eagerly looked forward to each week. The Maitlands were gone. Gone, gone without a trace, never to be mentioned again. The main character this time around, aside from the titular ghost with the most, was Lydia, who was somehow bumped back from an angsty to the point of suicidal teenager to a perky, chipper grade schooler who just happened to have a passion for all things creepy and ghoulish. The Dietz parents, Delia and Charles, were downgraded into comedic idiots who would fall for pretty much anything, and the afterlife, now dubbed the Neitherworld, was vastly expanded from the offices seen in the movie, with an entire world to explore, and many episodes not involving the land of the living at all. The biggest and most dramatic changes were to Beetlejuice himself, of course. It seems there's no place for a foul-mouthed, whoremongering murderer in the world of late 80s animation, so he was softened, toned down, and boulderized to the point where he bore little resemblance to the ghost from the movie. Oh, he was still rank and foul, at least physically, and still bore a self-centered, driven by his own greed and desire to amuse himself trollishness, but this Beetlejuice was best friends with Lydia, and lived in a boarding house, for some reason called a roadhouse, with several other goofy, lovable characters. He still had a host of supernatural powers, able to teleport, shapeshift, prestidigitate, possess the living, and do pretty much anything the script demanded, via the vaguely defined magic known as Beetlejuicing, or just juicing. But he didn't seem to hang on to the bioexorcism job from the movie, depicted here as a jobless layabout who occasionally dabbled in petty crime and con artistry to make money when needed. While a number of characters were shown to be, if not friends, then at least amiable towards him when he wasn't actually deceiving and pranking them, the general consensus of the Neitherworld was that Beetlejuice was the biggest jerk around, and police and authority figures hated his ghostly guts, a feeling he returned with enthusiastic verbal abuse and constant pranks. I can't go any further in this retrospective without stopping to mention the puns. Oh God, the puns were almost non-stop. To be fair, they were only occasional here and there in the first seasons, but as the series went on and good ideas wore thin, it happened more and more. 99% of the time, with no connection to the plot or goings-on, Beetlejuice would just make a wisecrack or statement that contained a double meaning, and then it would poof into existence, or he'd shapeshift into a visual gag representation of what he just said.
But I don't have any money. You know what I am, kids? I'm flat broke.
You babysitter?
Yeah! I'm gonna have to charge you the flat rate.
Beetlejuice. Are you ready?
All dressed, kid. Opera cape. La-la! Top hat. Walking stick. Hey, where'd it go? Whoa! You get back here, you! Hey! Is that Claire's costume? Let me put some Beatles in her bustle. Come on, come on, come on. Hey, Beetle jerk! I'm hungry! Uh-oh. Upset stomach. If you don't slide some bugs down here pronto, I'm gonna... All right. Don't bust your belly button.
Yeah. Oh, it amused me as a small child, but going back and rewatching as an adult, this was just painful and really put a crack in my rose-tinted nostalgia goggles. The puns weren't the only problem, but they were the biggest. Another issue I had was pretty common for shows of the era, and that was an over-reliance on gross-out humor. The Neitherworld was a universe of bad puns made manifest, and what wasn't a pun was usually related to snot, mold, slime, belching, nose-picking, and other similar puerile humor aimed at giggling little boys. The only saving grace here was a complete lack of fart jokes, although one episode did center around Beetlejuice becoming a music superstar by making the aforementioned biological noise using the hand-in-armpit method. The series had a variety of plots and scenarios, but over the seasons a few recurring tropes did emerge. A common plot would involve Lydia running into a real-world issue, like a school bully, a boring family reunion, or a particularly deranged lumberjack dead set on cutting down her favorite tree, and would summon Beetlejuice by saying his name 3 times and having him deal with the issue, either with his magic, his frightening ghostly presence and odor, or just by using some MacGuffin of the week seen advertised on Neitherworld TV that just so happens to be relevant to the issue at hand. And I'd like to take a moment here to stop and talk about Neitherworld TV. Yeah, I know technology and CGI were limited in the early days, but this is some serious ugly. I don't know who saw this art style and said, "Nope, that's perfect for small children. That won't give anybody nightmares." An opposite plot to this trouble in the real world premise was a disaster, issue, or problem in the Neitherworld that required Lydia, the only person in either universe with any damned common sense. She had to come and solve the problem of the day. The populace of the Neitherworld at large may have disliked the Bee-Man, but almost everyone, bad guys excluded, loved and respected Lydia, which might be why they put up with all the crap from Beetlejuice. He was kind of their only link to her. Aside from our main character duo, there was a sizable cast of decent recurring secondary characters to interact with the most common mainstays being the other residents, and one neighbor, of Beetlejuice's roadhouse. There was Jacques Laline, a stereotypical Frenchman in the ballet, who also happened to be a walking skeleton sporting a stereotypical Frenchman mustache. He was obsessed with physical fitness and keeping in shape, despite not having muscle to tone or fat to burn. Across from him lived Ginger the Spider, an aspiring tap dancer who was a bit more sensitive than the rest of the cast, and as often as not ended up in tears due to Beetlejuice's pranking. While not a resident of the boarding house, another character featured semi-regularly was the monster across the street, who looked a bit like Gossamer the Hair Monster from Looney Tunes wearing a cowboy hat and boots. He spoke with a Yahoo accent and was fiercely protective of his, dog? Is that a dog? Anyway, he loved his little pet Poopsie, and while he still suffered from Beetlejuice's twisted sense of humor, the ghost with the most was usually a little more sneaky and subtle about tormenting him, because while our hero had all kinds of ghost powers, the monster across the street had the mass and physical might to pretty much just beat him into a pulp and tie him into knots. The Beetlejuice cartoon was not an action-adventure show, so it didn't have what you'd call villains, at least at first. The troublemaker of the week was usually a one-shot bad guy who never returned after getting his head handed to him, although several did return in an episode when they ganged up to defeat Beetlejuice. Spoiler! They didn't win! And for the first few seasons, the only real recurring antagonist was more of a jerk and a nuisance in the form of Claire Brewster, a rich, snotty, stuck-up girl who attended the same school as Lydia and hated her guts. Probably because Lydia was different and quirky, as well as the fact that she stood up to Claire's bullying. She was pretty much your stereotypical vain female bully with, a savagely annoying habit of, using the word like in almost every sentence. She would go out of her way to try and ruin Lydia's day and humiliate her, but thanks to her guardian ghost buddy, Claire's schemes always ended badly, usually with her suffering the humiliation and mockery of her peers. She's not a very interesting character, really, shown as a pure asshat with zero redeeming qualities, and the only enjoyment from having her on screen is seeing her get her inevitable comeuppance. As the series went into the second season, the writers did add a recurring villain pair in the form of Scuzzo and Fuzzo, a duo of clowns who took great delight in messing with our protagonists in any way possible. I'm not using clowns as an insult here. They were literally a pair of Neitherworld circus clowns, with Scuzzo being the short, angry one who came up with all the ideas, and Fuzzo being the big, dumb, strong one who only talked in bicycle horn honks. I don't have much to say about these guys. They were created as rivals for Beetlejuice. They had no backstory, no real character development, and no given reason for hating him as far as I can recall. They were just villains because villains. The show was zany, quirky, and generally a whole lot of fun to watch, at least when I was 10 years old, and the episodes, with an occasional dud here and there, were enjoyable. Well, for the most part, in the first 2 seasons anyway. After that, seasonal rot started to set in a big way, and I don't have much positive to say about Season 4. I'm talking bad. The writers had just run out of steam, and there was a bizarre and inexplicable shift towards literary parody. About a quarter of the final season episodes' plots revolved around books, from The Wizard of Oz and Moby Dick to a particularly wasted Potential episode with Edgar Allan Poe. He rented a room in the roadhouse while a stream of poorly written allusions to his stories manifested to harass and mess with Beetlejuice. It was a sad ending to a great show, but it was fun for a while. It just outlived its welcome. And that was pretty much the Beetlejuice animated series. This concludes the 2nd episode of Old Man Yells at Cloud. I'm not sure what topic I'm going to cover next, but I am pretty sure of one thing. I don't think it's going to be about a TV show. Much as I love the shows I grew up on, this series is not intended to be a TV review show. I want to cover all things geek, or at least the stuff relevant to my childhood, so it might be a movie, video game, comic book, novel, or other medium, but I think I'll space out the TV episodes. Too much hassle over copyright ID flags. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!
Well, kids, so long till next time! Uncle BJ for house, a fun till kitty show. I do